We're at the Sydney Aquarium. I was giving my little ones an experience of sharks and starfish. Tom was 3 and had been desperate to see penguins, but we hadn't found them yet. Hannah was in a stroller, loving all the colours and shapes. I just turned away for just half a second to look at some fish, and when I turned back, Tom was not there anymore. He wasn't in that room, or the next room, or the next room. And I began to panic. My mind flooded with all of those unthinkable possibilities that we all have as parents when we're missing a child. And I just ran desperately from room to room. And eventually I found the customer service desk. And as soon as the woman there looked up and saw my face, she said, "You've lost a child, haven't you?" And I just nodded somehow and managed to give her a description, and then discovered that Sydney Aquarium, at that time at least, was a child finding machine. No sooner had she said something into an intercom, and she was telling me that someone had found Tom and that they were going to take me to him. It was really very efficient. And of course, he was with the penguins. He had managed to find them all on his own, and he was perfectly fine. But the memory of that brief experience of terror is still vivid in my mind. There was nothing rational going on in my head at that time. Nothing calm or proportional. While Tom was lost, nothing else in the whole world mattered. I was only capable of one thought: I must find my son. It's like that when we face the prospect of losing what is most precious to us. We've all experienced it, I know, and sometimes our experiences of loss have not had the happy ending that that story had. In Luke 15, we're given 3 pictures of people in such a situation: a shepherd who loses a sheep, a woman who loses a coin, and the third one that we're not looking at today, a father who loses a son. They all have the same message: irrational and desperate love. There are lots of stories about sheep in the Bible, and most of us have a bit of trouble relating to them, not just because we're not sheep farmers. There are a few sheep farmers in one of my previous parishes, but that didn't help much because sheep farming in Australia is very different from sheep farming back then. The farmers I knew who kept, say, 50,000 sheep, they did feel sad every time a lamb died, but it was not quite the same level of attachment that shepherds in Jesus' day felt for the much smaller flocks that were in their care. Even so, leaving 99 sheep in possible danger in order to rescue one is not a level-headed or rational course of action in any time or place. Maybe a shepherd would leave sheep with a friend or in a sheep pen, but that is not what the story says. It says that he left them in the wilderness. The picture Jesus is painting here is of someone so obsessed about finding the one lost sheep that he panics and behaves irrationally. He's even less rational than I was when I lost Tom. Even in my panic, I would not have left Hannah in danger in order to look for Tom. I buzzed around that place pushing her stroller. But this guy left 99 sheep in danger in order to track down the lost one. And Jesus makes it clear that this is what God is like. Not detached, not calculating the risks and chances of success, but irrationally obsessed with rescuing people in danger. Now, I know that people in Anglican pews do not tend to be science fiction fans. And it's an undeniable challenge of Anglican ministry that almost all clergy love sci-fi and almost all the people in the pews do not. Basically, Anglican clergy are out and proud nerds, while the people in the pews are still clinging on to some hope that they might be considered cool. So I need to ask you to bear with me for a moment, because I have found this aspect of God's character is well illustrated by a regular plot line that you find in Star Trek. You see, what happens when humans start going on intergalactic missions is that sometimes a crew member finds themselves behind enemy lines. And what inevitably happens is that an order then comes from Admiralty saying, under no circumstances are you to risk the ship and the crew by trying to rescue that one person. And that order is very logical, very correct. It doesn't make sense to put everything at risk for one person. But what always happens in Star Trek is that the crew get together and they say, no, this is not who we are. We're a team. We stick together. We will not leave a crewmate behind. And so they send a delegation to talk to the captain and deliver their ultimatum. But then they can't find the captain, because the captain has already secretly taken one of the shuttles and gone against orders to rescue the missing crewmate alone. Maybe leaving a message that says something like, no one on my team gets left behind if I can do anything about it. I will not put the rest of you at risk, but I must do something. The religious leaders in this passage from Luke's Gospel, the Pharisees and the scribes, are like the admirals, not like the captain. They are cool and logical, and in some ways they are correct. Jesus was spending time with collaborators and sinners, and this was costly. It was costly to Jesus' reputation, and it will eventually cost him his life to save these people. Were they worth it? Is any human being worth the death of God's Son, let alone a scumbag who has been collaborating with the enemy as tax collectors were? And Jesus' answer is absolutely. For one lost sheep, I will drop everything. He didn't think twice about leaving the glory and comfort of heaven to be born in a stable and live in poverty and die in agony, when his people, who he created and who he loves, are in danger. Nothing else matters. God is so desperately and irrationally in love with humanity that if just one person is in danger, God will drop everything to search for them and bring them back to safety. God does not leave anyone behind enemy lines. Now, this message has been in our Bibles for almost 2,000 years, but do people really get it? Do they really hear this message from us? They've heard about a God who is so demanding that nobody can ever measure up. That's a message the church has put out. They've heard about a God who enjoys sending people to hell. I've talked to far too many people who are afraid to come through the doors of a church because they honestly think the roof is going to fall in on them. This is the message that people outside the church have taken to heart. God is merciless and cruel, and they naturally want nothing to do with the people who worship a God like that. Even Christian people sometimes speak about God as a stern judge rather than as a desperate shepherd trying to rescue one lost sheep. Is that because we have forgotten what it feels like to be that lost sheep? Have you ever done something unwise or unkind or even downright wicked, that has taken you off the straight path and led you into darker and darker places until you realized that you were alone and afraid with no way back. Maybe it was many years ago, but you can still remember it. And because you're here or because you're listening, I know that in that dark place, in some way you have heard a voice calling your name. And it wasn't an angry voice or a stern voice, it was a loving voice filled with relief at having found you. And do you remember being carried in celebration on God's shoulders, all mistakes and sins and dangers forgotten in that big party that God throws every time one of us is rescued from danger? Those of us who have been rescued like that can't resist joining the party. We're not going to stand on the sidelines tut-tutting about that foolish, wicked sheep that wandered off. No, we will have compassion for everyone who is lost, like we once were, like we still are sometimes. And we will celebrate when we have been found and when they have been found. Those who have been celebrated can't help celebrating others. And in this season of creation, we are called to think like that about everything in our world that has been lost or is being lost. As we think about the many species of animals and plants that have become extinct over the last 200 years in Australia, doesn't that break our hearts? Could we say, it's okay, there are 99 other native species that are still around? God isn't like that, and neither are we. And when we consider the real possibility of sometime completely losing the Great Barrier Reef, do we say, well, that's only one of our national treasures? That's only one of our national treasures. We still have Uluru and it isn't going anywhere. That isn't God's attitude to us. God is like a shepherd who is so anxious about the one sheep who may be in danger that he forgets the 99 others. We humans were created in the image of God to be co-workers with God in creation. We were made to reveal God's glory to our world and to reflect the praise of all creation back to God. That is who we are. That is our calling, every one of us. So our attitude to the world should echo God's attitude to us. If God would drop everything in order to rescue one sinful human being, we are called to drop everything to rescue the parts of our world that are in danger. This season, we are invited to reflect and to act. What might each of us do to contribute to the healing of creation? And more importantly, perhaps, what might we do together? Let's keep talking about that and begin to act on the ideas that emerge from our discussions. Let's allow those ideas to percolate in our prayers and conversations. Those of us who have ever misplaced a child, as I did in that aquarium, even just for a few minutes, have had a taste of what it feels like to be God, to be desperately anxious for the safety of lost humans and willing to drop everything and face any danger and pay any price to rescue them. If you have felt that, you will know it is a profoundly uncomfortable feeling. That uncomfortable, painful, godly feeling is called love. Love for children who might wander off and get themselves in danger, love for family members, biological and spiritual, who might leave us or let us down. Love for a world whose suffering makes us feel inadequate and ashamed. Love is deeply uncomfortable, painful, and sacrificial. It is so much easier not to care. But God is love, and we are God's people. We have received the benefit of that costly love of God, and we are called to pass that love on to the world that God has given us to care for. So may that irrational, costly love of God be with you this week in all you do, in all you say, and in everything you are. Amen.